Me here, and I like the way Dr. Warrior put it. You know, when it is ultrasound, for a non-radiologist, they are just gray, black, and white lines. So where have we reached from there? I mean, I remember it was the year 2003 when probably me and Ashwin started reading books and then sort of implementing them on our clinical practice. But ultrasound has evolved from there. Now we have superb machines, very good technology, and we have to keep pace with it. But it has fortunately made our life much easier. So I'm going to just provide you a basic overview as to what ultrasound does in clinical practice. So it's a primer to make you understand first the terminologies that we use. So when you find the different terminologies in a report, what do they mean? Okay, so when we use the word anechoic, means there are no echoes which are reflected from that structure, and that structure allows the ultrasound to pass through it. And this is typically seen in all fluid structures. So when I use the word anechoic, I mean I'm dealing with a cystic, a fluid containing structure, which could be a ganglion, it could be any cyst in the body, it could be a vessel, or it could be a clear joint effusion. They will all look anechoic, and that's black. They look jet black on ultrasound, and that's anechoic. Hypoechoic means they are slightly on the blacker side, but they are more grayish black because they are solid. So when you have a solid lesion, they are usually hypoechoic, and hypoechoic, as the word says, is less echogenic than the surrounding structures. And this is typical of most masses that you will find in MSK. It could be a mesenchymal tumor in a muscle, it could be a schwannoma, it could be a giant cell tumor of the tendon sheath. All will appear hypoechoic. When I say isoechoic, it means the echogenicity of the lesion in question is similar to the surrounding structures, and it will mostly merge with the structure, and that is isoechoic. And when I say hyperechoic, that means that lesion is slightly more echogenic than the surrounding structures. And in MSK or anywhere in the body, more the echogenicity, I have a strong suspicion of a fat-containing tumor, or even for that matter, an inflammation of the fat, or even a fat fractures can have a hyperechoic appearance. So hyper is increased echogenicity as compared to surrounding structures. So we've talked about high frequency, which being a must. Now you have to understand the basic concept, and the basic concept is the higher the frequency of the transducer that we use, the better is the resolution. So when we started doing ultrasound, the highest frequency was about 9 and 12 megahertz. But today's technology allows us to have a 30 megahertz probe, which will give you fantastic resolution. However, it comes with a catch. And the basic catch here is, higher the frequency, poorer the penetration. Meaning that if I am looking at a very superficial lesion, then the frequency has to be highest. But when I'm looking at a slightly deeper structure where I need penetration, I need to go down on the frequency. So the choice of frequency is a compromise between better resolution and better penetration. So you choose which probe you would want to have. And secondly, and the most important aspect here for a sonologist is to avoid artifacts on ultrasound. And the basic principle of ultrasound is that once your beam is perpendicular to the structure, you will see the structure best. And that is a technical thing that all sonologists follow when we document structures to ensure that this is not artifactual. So we now have a gamut of probes that allow multi-frequency transducers. We call, if you look at this is 1 to 7, 2 to 18. Now this is a Samsung probe that a 2 to 18 that we use. It gives you a varied frequency. The 2 looks into the deeper aspect. Remember, higher the frequency, the more superficial structures, the better the resolution. So the 18 takes care of superficial, but the 2 takes care of the deeper. So you get a uniform image that allows you a multi-frequency evaluation of that structure. So we have a gamut of probes right from the hockey stick that you will see, which allows you a penetration of 6, but allows you a superficial evaluation of 24 megahertz. That is phenomenal for superficial tendons, specifically looking at the hand and looking at the joints of the hand. You have a multi-array transducer that is now possible. Previously we had only one frequency, now we have multiple frequencies. So just to give you a brief overview as to how a muscle looks. Muscle looks hypoechoic. So decrease in echogenicity, slightly blackish with this muscle fibrils, the adventitious tissue in between breaking the hypoechogenicity, and you will see that on dynamic evaluation they contract well. So whenever you want to check the integrity of the muscle, you would want to do a dynamic scanning, and that's a very typical muscle movement that you would appreciate, and you will see the muscle fibrils standing out as white lines among the black backdrop of the muscle belly. So this black backdrop is essential because loss of this backdrop tells you that this muscle is probably undergoing degeneration or demyelination, secondary to either a tear or a neurogenic disorder. A tendon looks similar to a nerve, except that it has got multiple fibrils within it, and again it is uniformly laminar in appearance, and the moment it becomes slightly blackened, hypoechoic, we know that this is tendinosis. So we can have a synovial inflammation of the tendon in rheumatoid and inflammatory arthritis. We can have a partial tear of the tendon or a full thickness tear of the tendon, which we can identify by the discontinuity of the tendon itself. Ligaments are always looked for as an interosseous structure where we look deeper than the tendons. So we have this thick band of echogenic tissue bridging the two bones, and that's a classical anterior talofibular ligament. So when it is torn, it is seen as a cleft and a fluid, and a chronic tear appears as a hypoechoic thickened ligament. Nerves appear as a honeycomb structure in transverse view, and we always prefer to trace the nerve in a transverse view because we can see this fibrils arranged along in a nice bundled way, and that's how we look at the nerve. And we look at all the aspects of the nerve. We can trace the nerve well. We can look at primary tumors like neurofibromatosis. We can look at thickening of neurofibrils like in Hansen's. We can look at a blunt trauma without a nerve tear, or you can have a complete glass cut injury with a complete tear of the median nerve that you see. You can pick up nerve and you can identify the degree of injury and use a Seddon's classification to grade it into 6 categories. Very commonly, we use this for entrapment scenarios like carpal tunnel, where you see the median nerve flattening out as it goes into the carpal tunnel. Dr. Ashwin will highlight this. Cartilage is echogenic, and it looks as a white line, and anything that is a tear in the white line stands out as a black line. That's a cleft. So that's a TFCC tear. We can identify it by the black line that you see there. Joint is always seen very well. The bony cortex is seen well. You can see the cartilage in between, and any fluid collection within the joint stands out. Bursa are not seen generally. They are seen only when they are inflamed. So you can have bursitis, you can identify Baker's, and you can predict the shape of the inferior margin of the Baker's to say whether it is ruptured. If it's got a sharp margin, we say that it is ruptured. And a bone is seen as a good contiguous structure, but we can identify occult fractures which are not detectable on X-ray by identifying these tiny clefts and overlying periosteal hematomas. So though we know that the ultrasound is overtly relying on your knowledge of anatomy and the biomechanics, and there's a strong learning curve to ultrasound, but there are distinct advantages of ultrasound over MRI that I would like to stress. One will be the superior resolution, especially of the superficial structures, which we can use by highest frequency probes, and you can characterize these lesions better when we use a higher frequency on a smaller footprint probe. And the most important aspect is the dynamic scanning, where we can actually see the tendons moving very well, and you can identify that there is a stenosing tenosynovitis to it. You can compare it to the other side. That's the strongest advantage you have. If I am ever in doubt in this patient of adhesive capsulitis, I can compare it to the asymptomatic right side, and I find that this coracohumeral ligament is thickened, and that's my strongest point against it. So there are strong advantages, no radiation easily available, but most important thing is it answers clinical queries, and it has an excellent clinical correlation. The patient can point out the site of tenderness. I can do a focused ultrasound and give the perfect diagnosis to the clinician. Thank you very much.